Brazil, the number of people affected by the rains has risen to 1.7 million due to the flooding in the state of Rio Grande do Sul since the end of April. In Palestine, the Israeli occupation army carried out heavy bombardments in eastern Rafah, where 110,000 people have already been forcibly displaced. And in Chad, the transitional president and leader of the military junta, Mahamat Idris Deby Itno, won the presidential elections, according to the National Election Management Agency. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba, we begin with the news. Cuba announced on Thursday the decision by a U.S. court to absolve a Cuban citizen accused of a terrorist attack against the Caribbean nation's embassy in Washington. The Cuban Foreign Ministry expressed its deep concern about the ruling issued on May 1st by a District of Columbia's judge. According to the statement, Alexandra Lazo Varo fired all 32 rounds from a magazine of an AK-47 semi-automatic rifle against Cuba's embassy on April 20th in the year 2020, causing extensive property damage to the exterior and interior of the building and endangering the lives of several people inside. The statement also accused the U.S. policy against Cuba, which it described as aggressive and a permanent incitement to violence by U.S. politicians and anti-Cuban extremist groups. In Panama, the National Scrutiny Board proclaimed José Raúl Mulino as president-elect of the nation following his victory in the elections held on Sunday, May the 5th. Mulino will be sworn in as head of state on July 1st, following a transition process that will begin on June 3rd. At the ceremony, he signed the act of proclamation in front of the magistrates of the Electoral Tribunal and international observers. The newly president-elect pledged to work in conjunction with international organizations in the processes of repatriating Panamanians overseas and deporting migrants who enter the country through the Darien Gap, the jungle border with Colombia. We go now to Venezuela, where the government repudiated the threats to peace in view of the presence of the U.S. aircraft carrier George Washington in the Caribbean maritime space and announced the deployment of an F-18 aircraft. The Minister of Defense, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, reported the activation of an integral airspace defense system before any attempt to violate the Venezuelan space, including the Essequibo zone. In this sense, the high official detailed that they will not fall into provocation of the Southern Command, backed by the Guyanese government, which assumed, according to them, the role of a new U.S. colony. Padrino Lopez guaranteed that the military forces will continue to work to defend the territorial integrity and the absolute recovery of the Essequibo. Meanwhile, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro signed on Thursday a law for the protection of pensions as part of the reinforcement of social programs. The Venezuelan president led the launching of the Grandparents of the Homeland mission to provide social attention to the most vulnerable people, victims of the imperial unilateral coercive measures. The signing took place during an event at the Simón Bolívar Park in La Carlota, where the head of the state highlighted the union of the communal councils with the elderly. After signing the law, Maduro made a proposal for the Great Mission to have territorial support, leadership bases, and popular strength in the communities and communal councils. And Venezuelan Foreign Minister Iván Gil attended on Thursday the 29th Ordinary Meeting of the Council of Ministers of the Association of Caribbean States, the ACS. The meeting was expected to address the role of the Association of Caribbean States in regional affairs, as well as the strengthening of the organization and its special committees. The city of Paramaribo, capital of Suriname, was the venue for the meeting, which is expected to deepen technical cooperation with the countries and the organizations of the Caribbean. Meanwhile, the former president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, denied having committed a coup d'etat and having attempted against the constitutional and autonomous bodies of the country. During a virtual hearing, the former president pushed to nullify and declare the prosecution's accusation as inadmissible for lack of evidence to initiate a preliminary investigation. Pedro Castillo also affirmed that he had never committed the crime of rebellion or attempted against the constitutional order of the nation. This came after the judiciary requested a sentence of 34 years in prison against the former president for the alleged crimes of rebellion, abuse of authority, and serious disturbance of public peace.
Mr. Magistrate, I'm accused of having committed a crime I never committed it. I'm accused of carrying out a coup d'état. I would like to ask the public ministry, as any citizen says, where in the procedural code, penal code, where in the Constitution is a coup d'état mentioned? I never committed a crime of rebellion. I simply read a document without any consequence. And I never attempted against the constitutional order, and less against the autonomous organisms that the country has.
And now we move on to other topics. In Brazil, the number of people affected by the heavy rainfall has risen to 1.7 million in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. The latest update provided by Civil Defense indicated that the number of municipalities impacted by the rains and floods striking the country since the end of April rose to 431. In addition, while the number of deaths due to the storms remain at 107, there are still 134 people reported missing and 754 injured. In this context, the most intense rainfall is expected to hit the region between the 10th and 12th of May. With this forecast, the state's governor, Eduardo Leite, stated that authorities are looking for dignity, protection, and care for each of the people currently living in shelters. The United Nations launched a plan to seek an aid strategy for Zambia after declaring a state of disaster and national emergency due to the drought that hits the country. The UN said that an estimated $228 million in aid is needed to benefit the 4.6 million people between May and December of 2024 in the aftermath of the El Niño phenomenon. The entity indicated that Zambia is experiencing its driest agricultural season in more than 40 years, which has led to crop failures and increasing livestock deaths and rising poverty rates. It was also reported that more than 9 million people suffer from food insecurity in the country and are in need of humanitarian assistance. Meanwhile, in East Africa, floods and landslides caused by heavy rain severely affect Burundi, Kenya, Somalia, and Tanzania. In this context, the United Nations stated that more than 230,000 people have been displaced in the last week. The report also stated that floods have affected more than 630,000 people, and in the meantime, there are no official records of deaths. Africa is highly vulnerable to climate change despite contributing only 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Precisely, this continent is facing alternative cycles of drought and heavy rains that also worsen the food crisis, as studies indicate that if current climate change trends continue, crop production in Africa will decline by 2.9% by 2030 and 18% by 2050. And now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Friday in Palestine, the Israeli occupation army carried out heavy bombardment on eastern Rafah, where 110,000 people have already been forcibly displaced. In this way, in the framework of the 217th day of the ongoing genocidal aggression, Israel continues to target Rafah, where more than 1.5 million displaced people live, more than half of the Gaza population. In parallel, a bombing hit a family home in the town of Abasan al-Kabira near Khan Yunis, killing 8 people and injuring many others, despite Khan Yunis being one of the destination areas for Palestinians fleeing Rafah. The attacks comes after the U.S. President Joe Biden warned that he would not provide more military aid to Israel if it began a military raid on the Palestinian city of Rafah. Dialysis patients from a major hospital in Rafah had to be transferred to the Nasser Hospital Center in nearby Khan Yunis in southern Gaza Strip, where Israeli ground troops withdrew a month ago. Patients and staff at the Abu Yusuf al-Najjar hospital were forced to evacuate on Wednesday as the Israeli operation in Rafah escalated. The hospital was one of the key medical facilities that received the injured in the attacks on the southern city of Gaza. So far, the constant Israeli attacks have closed almost all medical facilities in the besieged Palestinian enclave. Meanwhile, on Friday, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, the UNRWA, temporarily closed its headquarters in East Jerusalem after being attacked by Israeli extremists who set fire to the perimeters of the facility. Addressing the situation, Felipe Lazzarini, head of the agency, affirmed on social network that the complex was attacked twice, describing the event as scandalous and stating it posed a serious risk to the staff. Lazzarini highlighted that in the last few months, the agency's workers have been regularly harassed and threatened with firearms. The UNRWA executive also stated the headquarters will not be reopened until security is restored in the area. These attacks come after the Israeli authorities claim that the agency workers were linked to Hamas with no proof. And the President of the United States, Joe Biden, acknowledged the use of his country's weapon to kill civilians in Palestine and confirmed that he would stop the supply if Israel decided to invade Rafah. During an exclusive interview to the CNN, the U.S. President confirmed that he would halt arms supplies to Tel Aviv if it launched a ground invasion against Rafah. Biden also indicated that his decision is due to the fact that the continued aggression on the borders of the city of Rafah is causing difficulties in diplomatic relations with the government of Egypt. Biden also said that the Israeli actions have not yet crossed the red line. However, he acknowledged that they have caused tensions in the Middle East. And meanwhile, in the United States, hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters returned to George Washington University following Wednesday rallies, which led to evictions and the arrest of 33 participants. Earlier on Thursday, the group of students stopped in front of the residence of the Chancellor of Washington Center with banners saying, "We are not leaving," and chanting, "Free Palestine." Previously on Wednesday morning, police officers suppressed and cleared the camp, having arrested 33 ralliers ranging from 18 to 33 years old. Almost 3 weeks after the onset of the pro-Palestinian movement at Columbia University, protesters continue raising their voices in the U.S. and Europe to stop Israel's genocide in Gaza. Meanwhile, in Sweden, police in Malmö dispersed a group of protesters that were staging a demonstration in support of Palestinians outside the arena where Israel's entry to the Eurovision Song Contest was taking place to the stage in the competition's second semi-final. Thousands of demonstrators, including climate activist Greta Thunberg, marched through the streets of the Swedish city of Malmö on Thursday to protest against Israel's participation in Eurovision. The Eurovision 2024 Song Contest opened Tuesday in that city with the grand final taking place on Saturday, but the war in Gaza looms over the festivities. More than 10,000 people gathered in the town's main square before marching down the central pedestrian shopping street. Banners reading "Free Palestine" ever legitimates the genocide and colonialism cannot be pink-washed could be seen.
You can't hide! You're supporting it! This is what democracy
It's horrible what's happening in Gaza right now, and I think a lot more people should be demonstrating, protesting, especially now when the EU has allowed Israel to participate in Eurovision, but not Russia. And I think that's just it's wrong. It's rooted in racism and Islamophobia, and I think it's important to show that we're against it here. My friends and me, we used to like sit and watch it together, and we like do our own betting and see who's gonna go first. We have like this whole event, and we used to have a lot of fun, but I can't have fun when knowing that Israel is there participating when all those kids are dying. I think it's just wrong. I can't do that.
Now we have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and also share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In the Republic of Chad, the transitional president and leader of the military junta, Mahamat Idriss Déby Itno, won the presidential election on Monday, May the 6th, according to the National Electoral Management Agency. According to the agency, Itno led the process with a victory of 61.03% of the votes against his main adversary, the former opposition leader and Prime Minister Succès Masra, who obtained 18.53%. General Déby Itno surpassed the 50% of the votes in favor, a requirement to avoid the call for a second round of elections. The election held on last Monday, where more than 8 million citizens were called to exercise their right to vote, put an end to a 3-year transition period in the country after the death of late President Idriss Déby, father of the president-elect.
In view of this overwhelming victory, I am now the elected president of all Chadians. I am not only the president of those who voted for me, but also the president of those who made other decisions.
Meanwhile, opposition candidate Succès Masra rejected the results and called on citizens who voted in his favor to mobilize peacefully.
To all Chadians who voted for change, who voted for me, I say, mobilize peacefully. Do it calmly, with the same spirit of peace that you have shown in thinking about the future that we are going to build together. Witness what you have seen during these elections. Publish testimonies, photographs, polling station reports, and videos that show the magnitude of your victory.
In other news, in Senegal, at least 11 people were injured in an accident at the Dakar airport. The plane was bound for Bamako, the capital of Mali, and skidded off the runway during the takeoff maneuvers, forcing Mogadishu Blaise Digne International Airport to temporarily close its operations. A statement from the local Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport said that 85 people were on board the plane, including 79 passengers and 6 crew members. Among the injured is one of the pilots. It was also reported that the Bureau of Investigation and Analysis has opened an investigation to determine the causes of the accident.
The flight was operated by Air Senegal. The flight number was AC301. a flight from Dakar to Bamako, which departed with 79 passengers and 6 Transair crew members. The plane was at the end of the runway. It couldn't take off, and the pilot chose to take the plane out onto the field next to it. Personally, I think he handled the situation well. The plane wasn't badly damaged, and when it stopped, the passengers were in good health.
In Somalia on Thursday, the government called for an end to the mandate of the United Nations Assistance Mission in the country. In a statement, Somali Foreign Minister Ahmed Moalim said that the request followed a thorough review of the country's strategic priorities. The text, addressed to the President of the Security Council and the Secretary General of the United Nations, also called for the mission to end before October 2024. The UN mission had replaced the UN political office for the country, which was based in the capital from 1995 to 2013. And we go now to the world of sports, as Serbian player Nikola Jokic was chosen by the National Basketball Association as the most valuable player of the regular season 2023-2024, beating in the voting the Slovenian Luka Doncic and the Canadian Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. This marks the third time that Jokic has received the award, as he won back-to-back MVP trophies in the 2021 and 2022 seasons. It is worth mentioning that the player of the defending champion Denver Nuggets becomes just the 9th player with at least 3 MVP awards, joining legends of the caliber of Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Moses Malone. And Denver's talented player averaged 26.4 points, 12.4 rebounds, and 9 assists per game during the regular season, while shooting 58% from the field. It is worth noting that Jokic ranked 10th in the NBA in points, 4th in rebounds, and 3rd in assists per game, becoming only the 2nd player in NBA history to score at least 2,000 points, 900 rebounds, and 700 assists in a single season. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and also join us on social